When you think back to your favourite childhood stories, you probably have warm, fuzzy memories of talking animals and evil witches.
The world is my backyard.
But if you look a bit closer, you might find some unsettling details. Why are there so many unconscious or imprisoned women? Think Snow White, Rapunzel and Cinderella being just a few. One North East mother's decided to take action by calling for the classic fairy tale Sleeping Beauty to be taken off her son's curriculum. This is all stemmed by the story giving wrong messages about consent to young children. Sarah Hall from Tyneside says the story, where a prince kisses the unconscious Sleeping Beauty to wake her from a curse, features an inappropriate sexual message. Sarah has contacted the school to request the book to be removed from younger classes. The tweet in question since has gone viral, and Sarah has received thousands of abuse messages and says that since she doesn't want to be contacted by media. This is the tweet in question by Sarah Hall that reads, "Tell you what, while we are still seeing narratives like this in school, we are never going to change ingrained attitudes to sexual behaviour. #MeToo, #consent, #MySonIs6. I wanted to begin with finding out the origins of fairy tales. So I met with Dr. Jamie Tarani, who is an anthropologist based at Durham University. His work focuses mainly on the transmission of popular narratives, in particular folk tales.
Fairy tales were never originally suitable for children because children, in the sense that we talk about today, didn't exist in the old times. Children were peripheral participants in the adult world. There were stories that were told to adults and children. Children used to work, labour in fields, work in factories, do all that kind of stuff. So this idea of childhood as this pristine state of innocence, that's itself fairly quite a young idea itself. And the fairy tales that we know have largely evolved along with that idea of childhood as some kind of state of innocence. And in the case of Sleeping Beauty, I think that mum is absolutely right, actually. That maybe Sleeping Beauty is a story that's just had its day. As I mentioned, the vast majority of folktales, these stories aren't sacred texts. They don't stick around forever. Now, as this mum pointed out, part of the issue here is that parents often don't get to make those decisions because schools are deciding, partly schools at least, are deciding which stories children will learn as part of the curriculum. And I think this mum raises actually some very valid concerns about the content of some of these folk tales. Can you still have the story of Sleeping Beauty without that kiss? Yeah, you can probably come up with a way of what if they were already in love, before she fell asleep, and then it's like not so much a non-consensual kiss, it's two lovers, and he's kissing her, and she's asleep, but he's not a stranger to her.
Given that Dr. Tarani agreed with Sarah in saying that Sleeping Beauty was inappropriate for children, I decided to speak to some parents to find out if they agreed.
Don't think there's any problems at all with the fairy tales and how they perceive kisses and how the interaction is between a prince or a princess. I don't think it has any negative impact at all.
I think it's just been a case of being one person a male being some affectionate against the female. It doesn't really mean anything at all. I think it's ridiculous how people can come to the conclusion that there's something wrong in that.
I think that if we're going to strive for equality for boys and girls, we need to move away from this idea that princesses' daughters are an object that can be given away by their father or that can be won by a prince. It's a very outdated message. It's not a very positive message for our children.
I don't find any of the literature in it, any of the storylines, totally inappropriate at all. I think they're all fine, and I would expect kids to learn stuff from them, actually. Learn some different things such as sadness and happiness.
No, I think they're good. It all depends on which ones they are. The Grimm's fairy tales is not, but the other fairy tales are.
So, most of the parents that I spoke to don't think that fairy tales are inappropriate for children. It was interesting to hear that most of them are not fazed by the non-consensual kiss in Sleeping Beauty. So, should the story be removed from the curriculum? To find out what school teachers thought about taking the story off the curriculum, we spoke to school teacher Jonathan Bailey.
I don't think it should be taken off the curriculum. I think, it's first and foremost it's a story developed for young children. It's not meant to be, portraying, like it's been mentioned in the social media, a unconsensual kiss. It's it's just a fairy tale which so happens to have this in it. It's not a sexualized version of this, which is what this social media nowadays is making out to be. I think at primary school age, they don't see it as an unconsensual kiss. They just see, you know, a kind of a handsome prince or knight in shining armour saving kind of either a damsel in distress or someone who's been, you know, put under a spell by some sort of witch. They just see that as kind of him saving the day. Yes, if you want to take it from a very kind of analytical view, it is an unconsensual kiss. She hasn't said yes to that, but it's not, like I say, in the terms that we're discussing it, it's not done in a sexualised manner. It's done in a manner of, if this kiss goes ahead, I get to save this woman.
We're on the way to interview Charles Ward, who's the owner of Ward Psychology, to find out if there really is a link between childhood behaviour and fairy tales.
It's I think, sexualising their view of children in a way that is not the case. For young children, kisses are just ways of greeting people that they know, and it's a way of learning about appropriate ways of greeting people and so on. For them, there is nothing sexual about a kiss. Therefore, in that consensual, non-consensual sense, I don't think this applies at all. There's not evidence to suggest that fairy stories do affect their behaviour significantly. Sometimes fairy stories have a horrific side to them. We like that bit, we like the adrenaline rush that comes with being frightened. That's why we go on frightening rides as we become teenagers at places like theme parks and so on. The fairy stories, I think, providing they're dealt with appropriately, that children are introduced to them in a friendly, safe environment, are unlikely to have major serious effects on them at all.
So we've just spoke to Charles. It was very interesting to see that he doesn't think that fairy tales can affect behaviour. Grace McKenzie runs her own business as dressing up as Disney princesses for children's parties. She has also teamed up with her sister to open the Enchantment Cafe down in Sunderland. The whole cafe is fairy tale themed, right down to the products they sell. I wanted to know if she thinks that these fairy tales are inappropriate for children.
The original kind of fairy tales they're quite inappropriate. You've got your Brothers Grimm one, so the original Cinderella, it's like the stepsisters that cut off the toes and things like that. So them kind of ones there, I would say, a bit inappropriate for children. I don't really go into them when I do my parties. I kind of go in the more Disney, like happily ever after kind of thing. So I'm quite okay with that one. I've not had anyone think that it's been inappropriate. I think it is a big part of quite a lot of children's childhood, and yeah, I think it just brings happiness, and I think everyone needs that little bit of magic. And at the same time, kind of most fairy tales has that like moral behind the story as well, so it's not just glitter and fun. I think obviously teaches to be a nice person and things like that. So yeah, I think affect them in a good way.
While investigating if fairy tales are appropriate for children, I had discovered that there is no direct psychological link between fairy tales and how children think. However, I do believe that the content in fairy tales and the way they are portrayed could come down to a matter of personal opinion. Regardless of how you perceive fairy tales, they are going to stick around for years to come, forever adapting and creating moments of magic for children around the world.